Thank you, Gavin. As always, it's great to work together. We've made it through a lot of years into the modern era of dentistry, or perceived post-pandemic, whatever we want to call it. I think what's really important about tonight is we've realized through our coaching team, that dentistry is getting caught up in a lot of problems that we might not call the right problems. And it's not because they're wrong. A problem is a problem, and it always has a solution. But I think we've been doing video series, collaborating with our great partners at RecallMax, who we've worked with for over a decade, to grow dental practices in all facets of patient education, team culture, automation, centralization of analytics, and now with some amazing new creation that Leah's headed up as her role of Director of Client Success with Recall Academy online training, in combination with how do we help people learn. And you know, a software and analytics is only as good as the so what that comes after it. So joining us today, my esteemed partner and colleague, Dr. Sean Robertson. He will be joining us today from a perspective of what he sees, not just in the appraisal and the value of a dental practice. Sean's much more embedded in transitions, also in the operations, and getting the word out to dentists so that we can help them focus on what they can control. You know, they say the biggest part, the hardest part about, you know, turning crisis into amazing situations is knowing what you're focusing on. And right now, I've said it many times, the worst thing to do is nothing. We're coming back in person. Patients are starting to get more trust. Our colleagues from RecallMax, and they've got some really interesting things to solve. They service thousands of practices in Canada, also in the United States, and work with dental service organizations as well in their growth. I've got the Vice President of Sales and Operations, Jeff, who was my original meeting with RecallMax in Edmonton 10 years ago. And as I stated, Leah Kreitz, who is on the leadership team. And I have personally been training with her in person when we used to do it years ago, right, Leah? And she's an amazing, amazing trainer of changing adult behavior and getting administrative teams and dental teams to see what's in it for them and how to move from busy to being busy and busyness syndrome to being productive through using all of the wonderful tools. So I welcome all of you. And I think, you know, when we talk about the right problems, and I think we talk about, we don't need to relive what we've been through. Dentistry's come out of it quite amazingly for those that have focused on thriving. I am somewhat, worry is not an emotion I have very often. I'm worried about the practices doing nothing, who are just looking at their schedule going, you know what, all the people are in it today. We're just going to deal with it. We're just going to set it and forget it, or just like hope it keeps happening, because hope is not a strategy. So Jeff, could you start out with just showing us from your experience of where you've seen Canadian dentistry go through where we've ended up today, and then we can focus on some of the right problems.
Yeah, for sure. No, thanks, Lisa. And thank you for welcoming me today. It's always fun to spend some time with TGNA. So I really appreciate the opportunity to get together today and talk about what has happened to Canadian dentistry over the last few years. So I thought I might start with this diagram here, which is talking a little bit about what's happened between practice closures and restrictions, and now on the current heels of our staffing crisis, and talk a little bit about the waves we've experienced, but more so sort of what we're experiencing in between the waves. And that the visits that we're seeing, you know, in between closures and restrictions and so forth, have us feeling as though dentistry has returned to normal. There's like this false sense of normalcy. And what I wanted to start by touching on is that, in fact, we've missed 4 recall cycles since the beginning of COVID. And it's no surprise to anyone listening, I'm sure, that cancellations have created a massive instability in our schedules. And I think that the patients that are volunteering themselves back to practices in between waves are those that are truly focused on their oral health. And so we find that, you know, practices we're reaching out to nowadays are telling us that, you know, things are back to normal. We're busy again. And so I thought we might start the discussion today with just focusing on some of the statistics we have by, we're connected to close to 3,000 practices on our servers now. And so the data I'd like to share with you in the following slides are just some of the things we're seeing to help us understand the situation we're in now related to the data. Okay, so I thought I might start with unscheduled patients. And so again, I just wanted to focus on the fact that this is data that we're actually farming. And so, in sharing it with you, this is stuff that we're not sort of guessing at. We're actually seeing this real time, right? First, pre-COVID, we found that the average practice in Canada on our servers had about 52% of their patients that were unscheduled. And now what we're seeing sort of on the tail end of COVID is that number has risen to 58%. And so that doesn't sound like a lot, what's 6%. But when we put it in terms of the numbers, pre-COVID, there was about 1.8, 1.9 million patients that were unscheduled across our 2,500 practices. And we've seen that number now balloon to 2.5, 2.6. And so the actual difference nationwide for us, again, on a subset of practices, is close to 700,000 patients. Okay, and these are the same practices we're calling that have this sort of illusion in between waves that things have returned to normal. Next, we could look at missed and canceled patients.
Jeff, before you move on, as far as, because I've been talking for decades, Transitions have been supporting that if a active patient of record, anyone that's been in your practice in the last 18 months to 2 years, depending on who you talk to, is really the lifeblood of the goodwill and the value of the practice. And Dr. Sean and I see this all the time when we're appraising values of practice for ownership transfer. They really don't perceive that 40-50% of the active patients who've been there before are scheduled or are attached to their practice. So when you talk about unscheduled patients, you're talking about anyone who considers this place their dental practice, right?
Yeah.
They're just literally not anywhere in the schedule.
Correct. Yeah, and I think a common misconception there comes from most practices are very good at pre-appointing. Yeah. And so we have this idea that I pre-appoint 80-90% of my patients as they leave the building. There's no way that I could have 50% of my patients that don't have an appointment. But when we start to talk about the recall issues that occur and the sort of over-reliance on auto communication and then cancellations and missed appointments, it can pile up into sort of a perfect storm of an unscheduled patient population.
Yeah.
And so you're right, though, it's the absolute gold mine in a dental practice. I think there's a mentality in the marketplace that is focused on new patient acquisition, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think, that the easiest people to get back in the building are the ones you've already formed a relationship with. And I will say, too, that this 700,000 patients that you see here is within that time period that we're talking about. So within the 24 months since last visit. And so we're not claiming to have unscheduled patients that go, 3 and 4 and 5 years behind their last visit. This is like a white.
This is not inactive. This is true active patients not scheduled or attached to this practice, which jeopardizes and risks them going to a competitor.
Exactly. And that's what I was actually going to say. If you look at this patient pool as your patients who are at risk for being marketed to by the guy across the street or the gal across the street, this is your at-risk population who are being actively marketed to. And if you're not marketing to your own patients by engaging them back in, then you really do run the risk of losing them.
Right. And it has been shown in Canada that 65% of patients leave a dental practice because of indifference. Right. And that's not because we did anything wrong. It's because they don't know what they don't know, that there's a relationship, right? They're indifferent. There's not a strong loyalty there. So this is something I'd like to stress as one of the biggest problems we feel between management, your coaching through you at RecallMax, is if we can figure out a strategy for admin teams to use your automation and your software to handle this, it has significant growth in revenue.
And to jump in on the unscheduled patients thing too, as well, dentists that have formed relationships with patients, bringing those patients back in, those are the ones that have a relationship with the office, that have a trust relationship. So So in terms of explaining treatment that's required, you've already built that relationship. So treatment acceptance arguably is higher in that population. So getting them back in your office, to get them back into the program and to meet the needs that are overdue is really important.
Really, in summary, it's go with who brung you.
Right.
That's right. That's a good one. I might steal
that. Sure.
All right. Next up, we were going to talk about missed and canceled patients a little bit. So, I mean, this is no surprise that pre-COVID, the average dental practice in North America was seeing about 7% missed and canceled patients on a daily basis. At one point, it was 100% because we shut down our practices, but it stabilized here in the last 6 months in around 18%. And it is dropping, but what we're seeing is that the effects of COVID have really sort of been disruptive long-term on our misses and cancels. And it makes sense. I mean, I think there's still people that are getting COVID or getting COVID symptoms and missing and canceling their appointments. But nonetheless, it's tripled in the last 2 years.
Wow.
And so
and that tripling causes the busy syndrome of always having to fill the void same day, correct?
Well, correct. I mean, oftentimes these cancellations were not given enough notice for, so it's a very disruptive part of dentistry. And I think in part that's leading to some of the burnout we're seeing now. You know, you've got volatile schedules coupled with short staffing, and it's a recipe for frustration, you know? So, I mean, ultimately, again, when we translate the percentages to numbers on our servers, and I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but we really want to stress that this is only on 2,500 dental practices that we're looking at here, a sample of data. But on our servers, we've seen a difference of close to 550,000 patients that have either missed or canceled their appointment.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's a pretty substantial number when you consider this is spread amongst the practices we're referencing here.
That's a lot of people to put in the old days binder with a check mark and a highlighter. We're not going to attract people to dentistry with emotional intelligence by saying, here you go, call these 5,000 people and beg them.
For sure. And I mean, what's important here from my perspective too, is that you have some mechanisms in place to recover, right? Because you've got two issues when you receive a cancellation. You've got the cancellation itself, which is now I've got to capture that patient and reschedule them, but then you've got the opening it creates. So it's a twofold problem that you want to have something in place for to be able to navigate that situation.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, anyone? Leah?
Well, I was just thinking before COVID, my most requested speaking topic was overcoming no-shows and cancellations. I guess that's not going to go away.
No, in fact, you're going to be on the conference circuit for that one for a while, I think.
Wow.
Lisa, you've spoken to the importance of that with respect to, having a short notice cancellation list of 50 patients per clinical provider that are available, that you can cycle through and go, are you okay if we call you last minute, half an hour before, an hour before, so that you've got that reservoir there and a system in place that your team knows how to deal with that and hopefully respond efficiently.
Yeah, and our senior coach, Lori Vogel, who works on this diligently every minute of her life, she does talk about that, and she's finding that if each provider had at least 45 to 50 on your RecallMax lists that could fill these voids, that will reduce the effort 70–80%. It just works. It's not new. It's just now we can automate it with your system. We don't have to have them write it on a piece of paper somewhere.
Yeah, and while I'm on the thought, I think when we're talking about short notice too, I think a lot of dental practices stop short on their recall in the sense that oftentimes we'll work recall enough to fill our chairs, but we don't think about the reserve.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's also another point. And sometimes practices don't think about creating 40 or 50 patients in reserve per full-time provider. We just think about the task at hand, which is filling the chair. So there's food for thought too, because that's some of the coaching we'll provide is that, go beyond just filling the chairs and create yourself a reserve in your recall routine, because 18% of patients now are moving around in the day. And so you need something to battle that.
Well, and I think also when someone calls and says, I have COVID, it's not verbal skills needed. we're not going to say, oh, well, who cares? Come on.
No, exactly.
I would love you to, but you can't. Just saying.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
We're
going
all-
to be
we're all
counterintuitive because, I mean, the cancellation rates are going up, but we know that there's some, you know, staffing shortages. So we do have this misperception of like, well, we're so booked out, people can't get in, but it's actually the best opportunity to create that list because people want to come in sooner.
Right.
And then things fall apart last minute.
You're
And
absolutely
and
right.
it is the perfect time to create the resources when you do have this kind of shortage of appointments, so to speak, but then high day of change. So
Yeah.
it is the perfect time to build those resources.
Yeah, great point.
Mhm. Okay, now recall, right? Our due and late patients, which is slightly different than unscheduled. You know, we talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
People sometimes confuse the two. You can leave your practice today and be unscheduled, but then 6 months later is when you become due. And so now we're going to look at sort of our scheduling opportunity related to our unscheduled base. So pre-COVID, we were hovering around, the average dental practice would have about 33% of their patients would be due or late for their next hygiene visit. And that number as well has ballooned a little bit here to 38%. So on our servers, the difference is, you know, 1.2 to 1.7 now. And that's almost 500,000 patients here that are off their recall routine on our servers alone.
Wow.
And so, you know, it's substantial. And I think it speaks to, again, yes, there's people volunteering themselves back to practices right now, and so they should. I'm one of those patients that, like, as soon as I was comfortable to go back to my office, I would. But, you know, due and late percentages have increased substantially over the last 18 months as well.
Well,
Jeff, I would argue that,
sorry,
I would argue, Jeff, that, you know, 5% increase on offices that use a software that automates recalls and has a tight efficiency of that program means that those that don't are probably looking at a bigger number.
No, that's a good point.
For sure. I mean, that's the reactivation of keeping up with, from a management perspective, the oversight, especially with your brand new with your new launch of Platinum. I had to talk about it. I love it. It's awesome. And you can talk about that at the end, right? So it's not a mystery to anyone, but I think, you know, automation's great. You know, Jeff, we've talked about this for years. Automation's great, but you need the people, and getting someone on a schedule for reactivation using your software with uninterrupted time to focus on it, combining automation and combining in personal contact, it works. We've been doing it for 25 years before we had softwares with books and lists and tons of toner and paper. And I think it's just, you've made it so much easier for a dedicated to be able to, you don't have to have a dedicated time now. Reactivation's happening every single week. And, you know, Leah, you had a formula, remember, for years, you had a formula of how many hours you should spend on this concept based on how many people were overdue in your practice. And I invite anyone that wants to look at that I know you'd be happy to send it out to them, but it's what we use in our coaching to formulate a strategy for our teams when we coach of how many hours should I spend. You know, it's not arbitrary. It's not an hour a week. It's not 3 hours. It's very formulaic, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's something that most people would probably want to lean into, because when you're looking at numbers like this, it feels overwhelming. And then you even bring that down to a practice level. And I think there's a lot of people that don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. It's like, you know, what fire are we putting out, and how do you allocate priority to different needs of different chairs? And I mean, it is all about getting the right mix of knowing where to dedicate your time and how to utilize automated technology, automated messages, and personal engagement. It is a bit of a cocktail to get right.
Yeah. And that's why process, strategy, planning, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
so
go ahead.
If we start to attribute sort of value now to what we're seeing, and this is the fun part, because we like to look at this as opportunity. It's not a bad thing. If we're happy where we are now, or even just tolerant, we could say, over the last 2 years, you know, now where's the opportunity for our Canadian dental practices, and what can they look forward to in terms of some revenue gains and the value that these patients could bring back to our practices. So I'm taking that same number on the last slide, the 507,000 patients that are like off their recall cycles. And I think we're being very conservative here in terms of, you know, bringing a patient back to a practice, their annual spend of $500 per year. I don't know if you have a different number there, Lisa, but we thought we'd be ultra conservative in our estimates.
My numbers are our numbers are 750, but you know what? Less is more on this because it just means there's more possibility than you're even showing.
Okay, cool. So like, you know, because it's one thing to look at the stats and the percentages and the people, the numbers, but this is what it actually is worth. Now, I'm just going to talk about what's on our servers, and then I'll show you sort of a Canadian climate estimate. But currently on our servers, we've got close to $130 million worth of scheduling opportunity in charts. And so
without a new patient, without one more new patient.
That's right. These are patients that have been to your practice within the last 2 years, and you know, no new patients required. Relationships formed already. So I think it's just of note that again, if our mentality is that we need new patients to sort of recover from what's occurred, there's a literal gold mine we're sitting on, sort of practice to practice here. And
well, and you think about it too, a lot of dentists talk to us about their worry about their bottom lines decreasing, salaries have increased, supplies have gone up, you know, equipment, everything. And I tell them, focus on the top line. That's things you can't change unless you can control the supply chain or whatever it is. So focus on what you can control and do something about tomorrow is really accessing this. This is the top line, because when expenses go up, we have to produce more. It's a business simplicity, right? Simple business strategy. So you're saying there's almost 130 million.
And that's at $500 per patient per year.
Okay, so there's no excuse for flatline, and I'm okay, and I'm just doing what I always did.
No, I don't perceive it that way. And again, I like to spin this as opportunity, because I think
absolutely
that's exactly what it is. You know, I think
it's sitting right there.
And we're pretty rigorous about the patients that we know can add value back to the practice. Again, we're not going more than 24 months out here.
And optimism too. I mean, when you look at a new patient, there's an acquisition cost to getting that new patient in the door, to getting that patient to establish a relationship with the practice.
Trust.
There's optimism here. It's there. It just needs to be harnessed.
Yeah. So on that note, we did some number crunching, believe it or not. What are the odds of that? But so that the average cost to get a new patient in the building in Canada is roughly $360 per patient. Okay, that's what your average dentist will spend to get a new patient in the building. And then you look at the value of a new patient exam. Some exceed that, some don't. And that's, again, the importance of a recall system and of an engagement process, is that if you're not returning the patients that you've earned and spent for, it's all for naught. And I think a lot of folks think more about new bodies than existing bodies. And I think there is no, to your point, Dr. Sean, there's no cost to that outside of a phone call, you know, to get these people back in the building.
And Jeff, I'm curious about that number. Is that 360? Is that like advertising, marketing costs?
Yeah.
So that's not the cost of the patient being in the chair and the practice running during that time. That's
correct.
Getting them in the front
just
door.
To get them. See,
that's
right?
the marketing cost to get a patient in the building.
Yeah. Your website, your brilliant SEO, all the things we all do.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that's one of the things we like to touch on when we kind of try and focus our attention on the people we already have. It's just a nice number to know. Now, we're not saying you shouldn't market and get new patients. You should just recall them once you have them.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
That's the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Because you also want to recognize that this pool of missed opportunity, or any patients that are unscheduled, those patients are accessible to you for almost nothing. And all the other guys are paying that $360 to market to the patients that you can get back for $0. Yeah. And that's really the whole point of this, is like, you've already invested the money to get them in the door. So then just do a small portion to just kind of keep and maintain that relationship, which is what it's all about.
And we make it sound very simple, but really to multiply, we've got to simplify. And you just came up with 4 or 5 amazing, literally people could leave here tomorrow morning and set these 5 things of focus. That which we focus on improves by 10 to 20% with not even a lot of talent or effort. So you combine all the talent, the effort, the training, the support that we give dentistry, all of us. This is staggering.
So then if we look at it nationally, and all we've done here, if we're in 2,500 practices and there's roughly 13,000 practices in Canada, you know, we multiply this by 5. Now we've got close to 2.5 million patients off their recall routines in Canada as we sit today. And that is worth, you know, $634 million nationwide. So that's kind of the scope of the due and late and the sort of misses and cancels. When you combine it all together here, I mean, we're sitting on I think an amazing opportunity for Canadian dentistry. And I mean, it's just like, this is a substantial, it was shocking when we put it together. It's like,
there's a lot of
your math.
A lot of decimals in that.
yeah. It's like your calculator's full. So it's like, hey, maybe I did something wrong along the way here, but no, in fact, this is true. So anyways, I think the next thing that we wanted to start to spin into here is how can we start to capitalize on this opportunity? But I don't know if Gavin, there's any questions that have come along or anything that we need to take a pause on here for.
I saw one there, Gav. Hold on, I think I can see them. Oh, so the question is, recalling the patient, should we bring the patient back more often? That would increase the value.
Yeah, so I mean, that is certainly a strategy. One of the things, so it's actually an interesting point. There's recalling the patient, and then there's visit frequency that you want to take into account. Most of the time, visit frequency is dictated by coverage. And so that's a thing, though, that some people don't get right when they're assigning the continuing care inside their scheduling platform and making sure that the frequency matches the plan. And then there's going to be a whole lot of dentists that say, well, that doesn't matter. It's about the patient's health, right? And so you want to bring them back when they should be coming back.
Well, it's a perio program, right? You have 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever you do. It's based on their oral health, not their insurance benefits.
Yeah, and actually, I'll make another point. It's funny if you think about the importance of recall frequency. Let's just say that the average patient should come back every 6 months. If you recall them a month late, on that calendar year now, they have 1 visit instead of 2.
Yeah.
Right. And we have our cutoffs related to our books. And that's where even the inefficiencies in getting somebody back in time can cause a pretty significant impact on the books. Should you get them in when they should come in, being the opposite, right?
You know, Jeff, it's interesting. You talked about pre-scheduling, pre-booking, whatever we want to call it, right? About making sure the patient doesn't leave without their next visit. I've seen that go down a little bit. I've seen that because I watch our dashboard with all of our transitions clients and we talk about this. So I think, you know, that's something that sometimes people, you know, you ask a dental office, what's your pre-scheduling? They always tell you 100%. I go, perfect doesn't exist. Maybe 99, but no one's ever really been 99. I don't think I've ever seen it, but I think I've seen it kind of wean. It's like I've just noticed it kind of. Maybe that's another problem to focus on, is making sure you're looking. Remember the days where every day, Leah, your software would set, it still does it, I'm sure, send me the next day who left yesterday without an appointment. And then our coaches would say, okay, you need to deal with them now, not wait 4 months and harass them. Right, with 5 messages. So I just like to say, I never thought I'd see pre-scheduling reduce, but it seems to a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it drops down a little bit, it's all about the proactive schedule, right? And and the miss of the pre-appoint is what's lending to what we're seeing on the screen right now. Because if you book them before they leave, the downstream workflow for your staff is completely diminished, right? I mean, who would you have to recall and contact? There wouldn't be overdue people if you actually had that maintained high rates of pre-booking. So that it's an integral piece of the proactive approach to keeping your schedule tight.
Yeah, and administrators still agree with me, Leah. Every patient you let leave without an appointment causes 1 to 4 hours of telephone harassment, automation, thinking about it, energy, shortened lunches, filling voids, right? Like it's all of our stressors are simple to reduce or make better. We just got to do the work.
That's right. And I mean, what a dream world. Could you imagine if you did pre-appoint every single patient and then all you had to do was
send out an email
on the cancellations? All you had to do was manage any sort of movement in the calendar. I mean, it would be a dream. So
yeah. So I mean, if we talk about the opportunity now and what's sitting in our charts nationwide, the question becomes like, how do we capture it? And so I think, you know, there's some theories out there, and I think due to people's like, I mean, it's been a punishing 2 years, and I think where a lot of dentistry has gone is into how many things can I automate without having to sort of engage a patient. So, you know, there's a bit of a set it and forget it mentality in the marketplace, and it's not that that's bad. It's just that it can't be the only thing that you're doing, right? I think there's a lot of value in automated communication, and we'll get into sort of the next thing that I'd like to talk about is sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly related to like a tech suite. But I think on the left-hand side of the screen is where we like to focus, and I know you like to focus, Lisa, and that's in the people and the processes that are inside the practice. I like to say this, and I think like if even if we say that RecallMax is an amazing tool, I could hand you a hammer and it doesn't make you a carpenter, right? And I think where we make a great partnership is that, you know, you need a coach or someone that's going to come in and help you understand the why. And what we've seen is that practices that can really get behind a well-defined process, and they should be working smart, not hard. So like automation can help there, and you really start to streamline your front desk. That's where the majority of the gains come from. You know, the set it and forget it, the auto reach out stuff, the online bookings, all that can be an excellent thing, but it should supplement a really strong program at the front desk and for the office management and the owners. And
well, we're a human capital business, right? You put the people first, the money comes. We talk a lot about this potential of money, but that's really putting the people first, of one patient contact at a time.
No, exactly right. And I don't know, I'd like to kind of touch on this too when we have our discussions, but for some reason, like you look at your company, my company, anybody's company, you have to build it by engaging your customers.
Yeah.
Right. And somehow in dentistry, we've been a little bit convinced that you shouldn't have to engage with your patients and they should just come running back. And I think, you know, that's one of the things that we try and educate people on, is that our patients are vulnerable. And to Leah's point earlier, like and to your point, Lisa, too, about indifference, it's if I haven't been invested in and a practice opens up that's a block closer, or, you know, what have you, I'm not committed to you in any real way. And so I think that's the sort of mentality that we're trying to download into people, is that we should really invest in our patient base from an engagement point of view. Yeah. But how can we make that easier for people? And I think that's where we're aligned as a partner.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that's an important thing, because it's not easy.
Yeah. And Jeff, it's interesting. You know, the 2 years, it was tough. There's no question. I mean, we ran COVID survival. We all just pivoted. How are we going to support the people that brung us, which is dentistry? And I found the first quarter of 2022 the most difficult for dentistry.
Us too. Like, no joke.
Like the first quarter of 2022 was harder than any quarter that I've actually experienced in 30 years in the profession, not to be dramatic, but I mean, that's the truth. And I think, you know, there's a lot, we all know the reasons for that, right? We know the reasons. We know there's a great resignation. We know that there's burnout. We know that, you know, where do we start? Like Leah said, like there's 6 major programs, the problems here of like millions of dollars. Where did we start? You know what I mean? So I think I found this quarter to be the hardest, this past quarter.
We did as well. In fact, Leah and I were talking about this yesterday. It was like, there's a real sense of fatigue. And I think it permeates every business out there right now. But then to your point earlier, now's the time to sort of double down and dig in. And it's hard to do, but we're finding the same thing. Right. I thought that the first 6 months of COVID was going to be the hardest because it was chaos. But somehow people banded around the problem and for lack of a better word, there was some excitement almost around it. Like, how can we figure out the problem? I think now it's like, can we get back to normal, please? And
there's no more excitement over sewing patterns for how to make your own gowns. Trust me. I lost that excitement about a year and a half ago.
That's a private joke. See the creations, Lisa.
Oh, that's a private joke. It wasn't a private anymore because I could tell it. But out of all the things we did and over 900 things with Gavin and for COVID for dentistry, the most popular thing was, and I've never sewn a button. Was our sewing pattern for gowns because you couldn't get them and dentists didn't want to pay gown companies, right? So hygienists were at home sewing gowns off this pattern. It's very funny. You never know. Dentistry, that's why it's so exciting. You never know how they're going to respond.
This is true.
Yeah.
And so look, go ahead.
I was just going to say one other quote unquote benefit of COVID, I think that has kind of come out in the wash over the last couple of years. And this is speaking into this people and the tech or the automated messaging side of things is I think that there was this kind of sense of like, everyone, and especially the patients, are going to really appreciate the personal engagement side of things. There has been a long period of disconnect. People do want to talk to other people on the phone. They want to personally engage with people. And when automated messaging really kind of came on the scene and is the hot thing, it was cool. It was great. And it was brought in to free up people from the tasks that were taking away from personal engagement. And then somewhere along the road, it tipped into being the engagement piece. But I think that we're really in this great place to like bring back the balance again. And that's really what it's about. Because I mean, when you marry technology with people, it really is the greatest kind of thing that you can do.
You get the biggest output, right?
It is the biggest output.
It's interesting in the practices that had the hardest time. It's interesting. I don't know if you remember, Jeff and Leo, when this all automation was coming out. Oh, we don't need automation. Sally knows the patient. She's great. She loves calling them and leaving messages and saying they're confirmed, all those different things. There was people that didn't adopt to automation. To electronic communication. They thought they were going to do okay without it. But I'll tell you, when COVID hit and the shutdown happened, they had the biggest challenge because they didn't have global ways to communicate anything.
Yeah.
They had no way to get messages out to their patients. I mean, they had to keep team members there for walk-ins because they couldn't communicate to thousands of people at one time. I noticed a big hit. I think COVID's done wonderful things for automation being a solution for efficiency in the business team for sure of dentistry. But the ones that didn't do it they do it now.
Yeah, and this is like kind of a perfect segue because what I wanted to touch on next was, okay, where is automated communication like really strong and something that you would want to have in your practice? And to your point, when COVID hit and everybody like practices were forced to shut down, there was this thing where it's like, how would I reach my patients and let them know when I'm going to be reopening? How do I stay engaged with them over that time period and let them know like we're not going out of business? And I think like there's a lot of good things that auto can bring to the practice, and you see them on screen here. Like it works really well for confirmations, people confirming their own appointments. I mean, patients really enjoy that. They respond about 60% of the time. Newsletters are great, reviews, forms, digital forms, screening, COVID screeners, all that stuff. Mass communications, as you just referenced. Like this is like
the virtual waiting room. Remember, everyone was like, what's a virtual waiting room? I said the car and -10.
That's another good one, actually. Yeah.
Virtual waiting room. It's like, who's going to come up with this? What are we going to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, these are ways in which you can use sort of auto outreach to really help save time, to Leah's point. And that was actually a really good point. And you've never said that before, but I think, you know, somehow time saving became the thing that actually turned into, well, we shouldn't have to do any of it. And what we really want to do is like help people understand the difference between the stuff that's going to save you time and should versus the places where you need to spend time.
Yeah.
Right. And so where it gets kind of ugly is on the scheduling side of things. And so this is kind of interesting because there's like light bulbs that go off for people when we talk to them. Because when you think about automated messaging, you think it works because you have a Rolodex of responses going through your mind. And it's like, yeah, no, I mean, patients are responding to stuff all the time. And where they love to respond is on the confirmation side. So that's the good part. But the bad and the ugly is like when you're trying to get somebody back. So to this day, we've been monitoring the response rates of patients for a decade now. And you would think another misconception is, yeah, but people are getting more tech savvy. And so, you know, nowadays, it might have been 10%, 8 years ago, but nowadays it's not. And no joke, in a decade, this percentage is held true year over year over year. This is Halifax to Victoria. This is Canada, USA. It is 10% of patients will respond to a communication, auto text, auto email, when it comes time to schedule themselves, whether book online or to request an appointment. The response rates drop significantly. And this is a sample size. This is last year's data, 30 million messages. Like this is what we would call statistically significant. It's not our opinion. It is what's happening in dentistry.
Yeah.
And so when we think about using tech to help us recover and help us fill schedules and help us get people back in chairs, that's where it falls short. Like 90% of the opportunity is missed. And so we really want to start to think about what do we need to do to start engaging our patients? Doesn't mean you have to call everybody. Believe it or not, a personal text will get you 4 times the results versus an auto text. And so I just wanted to spin into this idea here where this was another sort of data set we analyzed. This is 200 practices, but 1 million contacts. Okay. And the difference engagement makes in boosting scheduling and recovery of appointments, misses and cancels and things. The auto service in this sample was getting a 7% kickback. So 7% of patients who received an auto message would go ahead and book themselves or request an appointment. When we had agents using our software at the time, either personally emailing, personally texting, or calling, either one of these methods, our response rate jumped to 31% on 425,000 personal contacts. Okay, so we were seeing 4 to 1 the results on, hey, a human being interacting with a human being versus the auto thing.
Wow.
And I think, psychologically it makes sense. Even when you're texting, it's very hard to ghost a person and just not respond to them. But the second auto chat I get is like, oh, I know this bot. And I'm comfortable kind of like skipping through that thing, right? And so you've got to put a little bit of elbow grease into your patient base in order to get them to come back.
Well, and this also speaks to, a lot of dental professionals are, well, we don't need as many people. We've got all these softwares and you still need the people.
You do.
The thing is, we need the people face to face in the human relationship and not to get caught up in the tasks. Dentistry relaxing COVID now. I was saying to Sean today, we look at how hard we got for dentistry to accept the changes of what they had to do to their facility and their plexiglass and all the different things. And now that they can take some of those down because administrative members are keeping their masks, they go, oh, we kind of like it. I go, oh, how do we win here? What do you mean you kind of like it? You bash the POS machine on it every time you pass it because the hole's not big enough. I go, wow, it's just, we love dentistry.
Yeah, this is true. Well, and look, the one thing that we're kind of preaching here is, you should be engaging your patients and you should be putting in the elbow grease, but at the same time, we've got this idea that like everybody's short-staffed, right? And so this is the great resignation part of the discussion, but I think I'd prefer maybe Leah and yourself to speak into it, but there's this idea of like hiring for attitude, training for skill. And right now we know that 1 in 3 individuals inside dental practices have either resigned or they're vacant as a result of a COVID sickness or what have you. So this is a problem. Like, we're asking people to dig back in. Meanwhile, they don't have the staff or they're short-staffed. Yeah. And so how do we navigate that problem?
Well, I could speak to the part of, it's interesting because it's fascinating, actually. From a coaching perspective, remember, we've got the fun job of being change agents, just like you do, right? And it's interesting, hiring from outside of dentistry, we are blown away at how much more open and coachable these people are than someone that's come from 5 dental practices looking for their next administrative seat to take. And it doesn't mean dental experience is bad. Dentistry can be taught in 2 weeks with a dictionary, with a couple resources that my colleague Melanie's written, Leah's Academy, our online courses we all wrote during COVID, right? Because we couldn't go in person. We still had to keep teaching content. But I think dental experience is going to be whatever the last person did. I don't believe in the admin department. Okay. I'm not talking about because, like BC's had 20% of their hygienist attrition from the profession. This is the admin team we're talking about. I honestly don't, dental experience is not the #1 paramount thing to look for anymore. And I didn't know if I always believed that until we did a lot of work on writing new hire programs, dentist, like new hire training with RecallMax and different things to teach them content. Then you teach them process and give them a guideline. But I am blown away at how much more open someone that doesn't have a history in our profession is to implement this. I'm pleasantly surprised. I think my coaches would agree. And please don't hear it like dental experience people aren't valid. Sure, they know tooth numbers. Someone worked on one practice management system. There's still going to have to training done on the new one, right? Someone worked on a different software. So I think we've got to be able to attract for patient engagement and social skills. And then we can teach this. I've never been able to say that in 30 years, and my team would agree with more confidence. It's not hard. Putting them in a chair, though, and saying, hope you're smart, listen to her osmosis. She sent 50 text messages is not training.
Right. No.
Or here's RecallMax, as we love it. Call them. They'll do an hour with you. That's not training.
No.
Right?
No, yeah. You're right.
So we've got to solve this because there's not droves of resumes coming in for experienced dental administrators.
No, you're 100% right. And I think that with the right onboarding structure and tools and resources, I mean, you can take somebody who has a killer personality and create a front desk rock star. You really can. And I mean,
even a manager.
Yeah, anybody. And I mean, that's the other thing is, I mean, in my time in dentistry over the last 20 years, I know that there was a hyper focus on experience, but even those who are maybe newer to dentistry and that sort of thing, you can start to really invest in them to bring them up to treatment coordinator or the roles that are lacking. There's resources available to really help these people through. And it's not just making sure that you have the smart people, but you have the smart tech that's going to align with them so that the onboarding process is shortened. And that's what it's about. I mean, lots of practices don't have the resources to do a massive onboarding program. And that's okay because there are resources available to shorten that training cycle.
Well, they could have probably said that a couple of years ago. They can't, there's no reason to say that now because all of us had time to pivot to try to attract these people to our profession. And I'm not talking about dental assistants. I've never talked to a dentist in 30 years that wants to work alone, to tell you the truth. It brings back memories of school. But I'm talking for the admin team. Let's take the dental experience and put them in the positions that we do need some dentistry in. And I mean, there's licensed acts and those kind of things. I mean, there's practices we have that are doing on-the-job training dental assistants from zero.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And they're doing dexterity assessments and, maybe it's a little bit of IQ and the ability to follow directions, which is a millennial thing we added, right? Because there's a lot of directions to take. But I think what doesn't not keep me up at night is finding great socially, emotionally intelligent people to work in the admin office with everything we've got. It's there.
Yeah.
And would you say then that it would how long would that training track be, in your opinion? Somebody who's like completely green coming into a dental practice and with
90 days for the biggest gradient curve, right? Then the next 90 days remember, this is with management and coaching check-ins of what did you learn? What do you still feel like you want to learn? Setting training goals. That's a strategy of how adult training works. We've done for decades, right? So with attended, managed, or coached training program, 90 days max, then you can take the time and get them to observe the 3 procedures in hygiene of health, disease, and maintenance. They can clinically observe the top 12 dental procedures done 80% of the time in a general practice and get an experience of the procedures. And then the next 6 months is them just keeping is monitoring their performance. And I find they love these dashboards because it tells them how they're doing. They don't fight it and go, oh, I'm not doing that. Someone will know I never do recalls. I told them I did 12. I only did 1. You know what I mean? They're not afraid of being caught not doing anything. They love this. And it's not generational. This is not, some people say, well, the younger ones, nah. You know what? There's people coming in from no dental experience and just have life experience. Mm-hmm. Or believe in healthcare, and with practice with a vision and explaining to them what oral health means. Why do we do this? We don't do this like a whack-a-mole game for money. We do this because we provide preventive. You got to give them some onboarding as far as philosophy and that kind of thing. But honestly, to answer that very simply, 3 to 6 months, you can have a well-versed, trained dental administrator that could move into treatment coordination relatively soon once they learn the procedures and some of the codes. They're all there. I mean, all the dental associations have modules. We have them. You have, there doesn't lack content and knowledge training.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna skip ahead a few because you brought up something that
triggered you.
Yeah, it was this idea of and I think they're the sort of huge fans of one thing that you mentioned, which is I think there's a little bit of a gap too between what people are doing at the front desk right now, and assuming we could recruit some amazing talent and place them within 3 to 6 months. And I believe you. I think that's
we've done it. That's not made up. That's not my instinct or prediction. Now that's history.
Yeah, and then for us, the other step is, and I'm sure you'd agree, is that you need oftentimes, and this is no fault of office management, but the PMs that they use aren't well designed to monitor activity at all. In fact, the best thing that you've got is, hey, run up to the front desk and say, did you do your recalls today? Did you get back to those cancellations from yesterday? Like we have anecdotal evidence at best, and there's really no concrete way to measure someone's activity. And one of Leah's favorite sayings, which I've put on this slide, is inspect what you expect. And I think whether you're doing this with software or you're doing it manually, you have to have systems in place to be able to concretely measure.
Validate it. Yes, validate
what somebody is up to. Because this is a huge gap that we see. And, it's almost like having a ship without a captain. And there's not, and I don't mean this as a make wrong, but there's no one at the front desk when you walk up is going to say, well, I haven't been doing any patient outreach for the last week. Like this doesn't happen, right? So I think this is a key element to success. Assuming we could help practices get their folks trained up in a hurry and get them effective and front desk rock stars, as you put it, we still need something in place that's going to help managers understand what these folks are doing and have a real coach and mentor to be able to guide people in the right direction.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're very right. And I think that, from just working with managers a lot, it's not assessing not being in the same environment, or even when you're with the people that you manage, right? This is when there's a level between the owner and the team, right? Management isn't doing it for them. Management isn't, interpreting a report. You can do a day end in 5 minutes and a month end in an hour now. You know what I mean? It's how do you keep the performance of your people up, and how do you keep them engaged? This isn't to find them doing something wrong, but not looking at the oversight and all the dashboards and knowing exactly what every team member is doing is to reward what's working. That which is rewarded is repeated. That which they know is monitored and tracked improves by 10% because they don't want to be embarrassed.
Correct.
You follow me? So I think this is a big, I had a client, it's interesting. I had a client call me last week and she said, my hygiene schedule is blown open and my manager says I'm expecting too much from her to go on the RecallMax dashboard because that shows where they can solve their problems. And I said, that's not an expectation. That's just a fact of management. If you want to solve a problem, why not go somewhere to a dashboard that tells you exactly where you can then sit for 10 minutes and mentor and coach that person to put their focus to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And the nice thing about numbers is they're void of opinion. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like there's truth in numbers. And I know that's a common saying, but it's really how it is. It's being able to look at something and say, hey, like you're excelling at this. Congrats. This is struggling. Let's get resources.
How do I help you?
How do we help you excel at everything and win at all things without it being, like you said, a make wrong or anything like that? And it's not about micromanaging people. It's having the capacity to, at a glance, see where there's gaps and then being able to insert solution so that you can close the gap. And that's
and I think sometimes managers, I've heard them say, well, I don't want to be too hard on them, they might quit. Okay, well, here's the thing. They're gonna quit if they are just allowed to do what it is they're doing. They don't get a result, and then you tell them at the end of a 30-day cycle is going to be way more offensive than to say, let's sit and strategize. Where can I help you? What do we need to do in this practice to support you to focus on this? Because you can measure, right? You can measure how many contacts are made. What was this conversion? For years we tracked conversion rate by the honor system on a monitor. I almost feel a little embarrassed because probably they were embellished by about 2/3 because obviously a human temptation to write, you did a few more things than you did because no one would find out. So this isn't to catch people doing things wrong so that they leave. This builds culture. You have a team meeting, celebrate. You know what? The administrative team did a 56% conversion. We went down 10% on our unscheduled. Look at our due and overdue. And by the way, can we have some compassion? They just had 14% of every day last month changed because of COVID, right? So there's such amazing management tools. You don't have to be a professional coach to know this, but the managers not looking at this or resisting it are going to get not the best reviews as far as how they're mentoring the people they lead. And you know what's interesting? People without dental experience don't tolerate lack of training like dental experience people do. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that, but I think that
they don't tolerate. They go, well, no one's helping me. I'm new here. Well, you have to help someone that doesn't know tooth numbers.
No, this is true.
Right?
I think too, we say it all the time here, and it applies everywhere, is that it's sort of that player coach mentality. Like if a rock star is only as good as the coach that can help guide that player. Like we make the analogy, I'm a basketball fan, and you think about the Michael Jordans and the LeBrons of the world. I mean, they became who they were under certain systems and coaches that really helped them shine. So it's not just about talent, right? I think it's about guidance with talent, and
the other T. It's called training. Training solves everything.
And guys, on the theme of training, there's a question here of what sort of program is in place for training staff members for front desk managerial positions. Whom should I approach? What website? And I'll just speak to that briefly. That Transitions University and RecallMax have collaborated to provide a training module that it combines in-person and automation training over a 12-week period. And the purpose of that is supporting practice owners and teams in onboarding non-dental personnel, which, as Leah and Lisa have already highlighted, is a must in today's climate of hiring.
And if I could also add to that. So Transitions always worked on the methodology of, I'm a hygienist by nature, and dentistry: assess, diagnose, plan, implement, and evaluate. So RecallMax's health check, which can easily be done, is complimentary. They do that as gracious way for us to help our clients get a starting point. You do an assessment of a health check. You look at what is the role that you're defining. You put the in-person, you put the TU courses, which are content-based accredited programs with Recall Academy. Leah, could you talk a little bit about Recall Academy at this place? Because a lot of people know what Transitions does, but we are doing more. We're doing content and knowledge training of a person on their own time before we take a practice out of production. That's what COVID taught us. Right.
Yeah. So the RecallMax Academy, we structured online learning. I mean, obviously we've learned a lot about, even through COVID and you know, not being able to do any kind of training in person and that sort of thing, and understanding how people learn best. And we structured a micro learning environment that they can take at any point. It's all modularized and it is tested as well. So part of this analytics conversation is we have a lot of information related to the health of the business, the performance of the production, and that sort of thing. And what we really want to bring in is, especially for managers, and if you're looking to bring on non-dental people and that sort of thing, is how do you assess what they know? And the only way to do that is through, you know, quick examinations and checks and giving them the content and then pop quizzing them. And then getting all of that information on a dashboard where you're going to be able to tailor more of their onboarding and training towards maybe areas where they struggled in comprehension of that specific element and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what we've built here as a supplement to the RecallMax toolbar is all of the know-how on how do you optimize what's sitting here before me? How do I speak to the patients? What is working smarter and not harder? And you know, where are my best opportunities and that sort of thing? And we really geared that into an online academy that
and you combine that with Transitions University core courses. Really, it's the fundamentals of all facets of dentistry, right? We haven't even talked about the potential of Cabinet Millionaire and Outstanding Dentistry and Restorative. Like the opportunities are so big. Sometimes people get annoyed with 9 zeros after numbers. I understand that, but I think you combine and everyone gets points for them. They all get accredited, they get rewarded. And I think you're assessing their retention so you can start where they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the in-person management or the in-person coaching then can keep taking them through their path of setting goals and learning. It's adult training. It's adult learning. It's just, we've done it for 25 years because we believe in it, because all of us get results. But dentistry doesn't have a choice anymore to train. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Position where you have to invest in the people, and that's the only.
If you want to keep them, right? And don't look at training as disruptive, because there's people craving direction. Right? What's one biggest thing about burnout is like, what do I come in and do? We'll just sit there and look more miserable. We're all in the same place. Well, that's not how you build a culture, right? That's just how you get apathy. Apathy is my least favorite thing in the world, but we don't care and we don't care that we don't care. Well, then nothing's going to change. Right? I call it lowest human emotion before dead. Was there any questions? Do you see any questions, Shani?
No, nothing new here.
Okay.
I just wanted to add that, you know, to touch on what you've all just sort of commented there, Lisa, you know, you can't know it all anymore in dentistry. It's a new era. It's a modern era. Things are evolving. Things are changing. We all know that. And as you said, burnout in the profession is prevalent because of all the demands that we face as dentists and business owners. And, you know, the key to preventing that, I think, are the right systems and the right support and the implementation of those systems. And I would argue now that, the investment in technology and having automation and practice management is absolutely as necessary as a handpiece in the modern era of dentistry. It's impossible to do it alone and without those supportive tools. So to our listeners, if you don't have the right technology and management operations in your practice, reach out to RecallMax and Transitions to get the support you need to prevent burnout, to maximize your profitability. The QR codes that are on your screen will lead you to the contact page. There are some questions regarding costs of programs, and you can get the information there, at least to contact who you'd like to contact, and have a one-on-one conversation with respect to what you're looking for in your practice and how these two companies can align and support you.
Yeah, great point. And I think, like I said, we're pivoting all the time to keep up with the profession that served us and that we serve. And I think that, collaboration, COVID taught us all, no one could know it all. And it was really lonely if we wouldn't have had each other. All of the great, we work with great people. I always say thank you to all the wonderful people we work with now and the ones we no longer work with, because there's a reason and we're all good. So I think it's all about getting results, and it's all about keeping dentistry on a growth curve. Dentistry as a country was predicted to decline by 2.5%. Not on my watch. Jeff, on yours either.
No.
Not on my watch. It's dentistry. We're $13 billion a year. It can't decline.
Yeah.
And it's only going to decline by people that just think it's going to automatically happen, that today's busyness is tomorrow's productivity. And I mean, you're right. The people combined with the automation and, the growth, do you need less people when you're automated? There could be some efficiency developed through that. It's not necessarily less people. It's people focusing on the right things, right? Like, one thing I've always told you, Jeff, is your company name drives me crazy. You're so much more than Recall.
But that's where it was born. Yeah.
But it's still no different than my name's Transitions, and that's an eyewear company globally, right? So we're all in the same boat. But I mean, there's so many other things that if people would just go on and look, and this isn't about anything other than, it's not about me plugging you plugging me. Like, it's not about that. It's about what works. And these numbers are not instinct. They're not. No. Lisa Phil made it up last night because she couldn't sleep, and because it could happen. This is accurate data, and it's organically sitting right in front of all of us. And what I heard you say is, I mean, did you speak to overusing automation? And you can't just send out 1,000 text messages and go, well, nothing changed.
Yeah,
did you speak enough to that?
Yeah, I think the point there was just that you want to use automated communication as part of a strategy. I mean, we provide it. There's lots of companies that provide it. I wouldn't hate on it. I think it's a good thing for people to have. I think what happens sometimes, though, is that practices think it's the only thing they need to do. And I think what we're trying to establish, because I'm aligned with you, Lisa, and I know Leah is too, our mantra in our lunchroom is that we're here to help practices grow, not sell software. And I think that's our DNA. We're deeply committed to practice success. And you're right, change doesn't happen overnight, it happens over time. But what you want to do is invest in the right things, in people that can help you get there. And then there is an element of patience, but every day that you move your business forward in the right direction is a good day. And so, that's kind of where we come from is I think that we're not claiming to be a fix-all overnight, and neither are you, but it's the work that you do with these types of solutions that gets you to where you want to be, versus searching for a magic bullet. Right. And I just don't think there is one when it comes to, performance in dentistry.
Well, and I think your process of your automation with the entire active patient base, right? It doesn't mean you don't market. Like, we're not saying there's just one answer. And I've said this for years. There's not just one thing in dentistry. There's one problem at a time. right?
Yeah.
To focus on. But I don't think there's one thing, but I mean, from the marketing and, you know, the analytics to you managing the patient engagement from A to Z, from the surveys and knowing what patients like, what they don't like. Like, there's so many different things. And then you look at what's grown clinical dentistry. Think about it, is technology in handpieces that reduce tooth structure faster, man-made fabricated tooth roots, and digitization of scanning and impression materials and all the things these new generation are coming out going, you really like, you don't have digital radiography? Are you kidding, Sean? When you do an appraisal and you've got buyers and they go, well, what's the technology? Wouldn't you say that's one of their top 3 questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, your timing's perfect, because there was a question just posted now about buying new technology and smart tools. What are the best investments? And it's true that everything is going in that direction. And in fact, patients are demanding that. Patients are looking for that. So it all kind of goes together in terms of automation and what you're providing. It's interesting because arguably we're in a healthcare crisis right now, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of patients that in their standard care are frustrated, that are waitlisted, that are behind. Again, I see that as an opportunity, because dentistry can redefine itself. And as Jeff has said, you know, that what RecallMax is doing, we're in a high volume relationship-based business. And so what these tools are all about is managing that volume and strengthening those relationships, which is, it's impossible to do alone. And you want to be providing quality care in an environment where the patient feels safe and is as modern as possible. Those elements absolutely add value. I mean, to the person who asked the question, which tools, that really depends on the type of practice you have, the demands you have in that practice, what kind of care you provide, and so many factors. But yes, Lisa, I mean, those who, and we wrote an article about this in Oral Health in January, the practices that we analyze that are the most successful are the ones that have invested in themselves. They have invested in technology. They have invested in infrastructure and support like RecallMax. They have invested in practice management. The ones that are reinvesting are in fact thriving. And that's probably to Jeff's point, because they can manage the patients that are in need of coming back.
Yeah, and you know, we say, this is another maybe final point, but if you think about all the tech and where most of innovation goes in dentistry is chairside.
Yes.
And we often overlook the front desk, which are the operators of the multi-million-dollar business. And so it's kind of an interesting dynamic, because they've got their PMs that they've been using, and sure, you know, your Dentrix or your Eagle or whatever received an update, but that's about as far as it goes. Yeah. And so kind of what we're in the business of doing together is really helping the operators become more efficient, because the folks that are doing dentistry, they have the latest and greatest, but we really want to start to think about how can we lever people that are operating the productivity of the front desk with technology to help them do better as well. And so it is an interesting thing to think about, because the front desk,
no one likes, you know, the days of a dentist going to a convention and buying a piece of technology for the clinic and it sits there like the exercise bike in my bedroom. Right? They're frustrated now. They used to be okay with that before. Oh, I bought something, a shiny new thing. They brought it back, and well, no one uses it. Not sure how. I didn't get any training, right? But now I find, without the administrative run with this efficiency, the dentist can't use any of that technology. There's no, if we don't have a patient or provider in a chair, there is no practice.
Yeah.
To simplify it and dummy it down, right? So I think the focus on the business office, you called it front desk, but you know my joke, that's a piece of furniture, just saying.
Okay, my bad. I'm a dinosaur. Look at all my gray hair. And I know this is real.
We're both gray, honey. My gray's real. We're both. COVID gave a lot of people gray hair. Leah still got beautiful hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the essence of all this is know what's working. I said this for so many years. If it's working, do more. If it's not, do something different. And if you don't know, stop living under a rock in denial and apathy, because you're going to be left behind. Patients are looking at us in healthcare, like Sean said. They're looking at us as the stellar echelon of being able to get into a part of healthcare, and COVID's done amazing things for patients' perception on oral health being the gateway to overall body wellness. We don't have to preach it as much anymore. They get it.
Yeah.
Right? And they're getting sick. They're getting sick. So I guess, what do you think, Shadi? Is there any more questions? Any more thoughts?
We're all caught up. I think we're there, guys.
Okay, well, in summary, if I could do one thing, just clarify our key problems we talked about, because we're going to be continuing this through 2022, all of us, on focus on know your problems and focus on fixing the right ones. Okay, I can't tell you how to get N95s cheaper. Please stop calling me. I don't know. I'm not a distributor. I don't know why ADEC takes 10 months for a chair. I have no control over that. You know, I know hygienists ask for a lot of money, and as long as they earn 4 times what you pay them, who cares? They're better than you doing your own hygiene, right? So I'm not being crass here. I just want to disrupt people's. I want to disrupt dentistry's perception that doing nothing. This is not the time to do nothing, and you've done nothing for a quarter, as we've all seen in our statistics and analytics. I don't mean done nothing, but we've been afraid to focus on growth. That which is focused on and tracked improves by 10%. So if we said to you, just by being here for this 90 minutes of your time, you'd have a 10% top line growth with no further expenses, except for the investment in the training and the economical courses we all put blood, sweat, and tears into making sure they're great, right, Leah? And retainable, and an adult can absorb them. I think focus on your unscheduled patient. That's the goodwill of the practice. Missed and canceled, and building your short notice list so that you can have strategies that are less stressful for same day changes. Look at who's overdue for the recall and start with a 10% goal to activate 10% more people to get on their interval than you had last week, last month. I think the pre-scheduling, don't think it's 100%. Look at your stats and see that what percentage it's at, and talk about it every single month. We never stop doing that. And I think get your team together on a monthly basis, celebrate what's working. They need to hear what's working, and talk about 1 or 2 things that you're going to focus on as a group to make better next month. And I mean, the patient engagement, there's so many other things. There's so many other things we could do a whole nother town hall on, but I think look at your outstanding dentistry. It's all sitting right on the screen in RecallMax. And I know all of you tell me it's not accurate. Okay, I get it, but it doesn't matter if only 50% of the numbers I see that are sitting in the charts for your storage department were true. You double your practice in a year. So let's stop focusing on the little things. Let's look at the big picture and say what's going to have impact tomorrow, next week, and throughout this year, so 2022 dentistry can have some growth.
Well said.
Yep.
Okay, are we good?
Yeah, Lisa, thank you again for the opportunity. And Dr. Sean, this was a lot of fun, and it was a pleasure getting together with you tonight. So again, thank you.
Likewise.
You're welcome.
Leah, Gavin, thank you.
Yeah, and we did record this, right? So I guess we will have it on both of our websites, right, for future viewing?
You got it.
Okay. And I love these QRL codes. QRL codes, by the way, was one of the fastest growing explosion of a dead concept of technology, I was just told during
That's
COVID.
Kudos to Kevin at RecallMax. He had those things done in about 7 seconds. It was amazing.
Gotta love those Utah guys. They're brilliant and they're so sweet.
They are. Yeah.
Okay, well, like I said, we talk all the time, and I'm so excited for my first trade show in Manitoba, in Winnipeg. Are you guys going to be there? We're actually going to get to hug people.
I know. Our next show is the ODA, so we're going to be there with you.
Okay, I'll hard hug you at the ODA. Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna call you out on that one.
Oh, I love hard hugs.
Okay, sign me up.
Okay, and thank you, Gavin, for all you do too as well. And Gavin, like I said, Gavin will get all of this out, and we'll have it ready, because dentistry will win. Failure's not an option.
You got it.
Okay.
Thanks to everyone who came.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Leah.
Bye.
Bye.